Hey, this is Misery Loves Company, a weekly social reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. Every Friday, we welcome outsider and transgressive writers to come and share their work with us. And it's Friday again, so we might as well get to this thing. So, first up tonight is Bizarre.
Hello, happy Friday. So I have one poem, and I wrote this in the last week or so. This piece is called Never Unsubscribing. I can't believe I have 2 feet. I can't believe each foot has its own 10 toes. A pinky toe on my left foot has seen species sleeping in trees and hairy backs recede like our ability to sense when the moon wants us to sleep. Blue light keeps us awake, and I'm up. All of my friends live in a computer inside my pocket. It feels so good when they vibrate between my thighs. Good morning to all of the people whose faces I don't even need to see to know that I love them. I am sexting with an anonymous PFP. Someday, my grandkids, grand drives, grand memory children, will wonder why we sold feet pics to pay for the Netflix subscription. But their world will have unskippable ads to use the kitchen sink. Honey, did we pay the plushie bill last month? Don't let them take Pussy Destroyer 9000 away like they did to the Saturn and Capricorn pillow. She was my only form of physical touch. Babe, wake up. New bot terrorism album just dropped. Good morning, Vietnam. You feel so good inside my VR headset. Let's send each other sweating face emojis until I can fuck you in lucid dreams. I keep seeing rats on the kitchen floor that aren't really there, and I miss them. I miss my iPod video with the cracked screen. Swipe up to send a fleet of Boston Dynamics dogs to your state senator's front door. I don't exist, but people are starting to see me. You wouldn't get it. Amazing how once we thought people didn't live in a simulation. Life is a matrix, and thank God I am an algorithm. Thank you.
Holy shit, Bizarre. I think this is one of my favorite pieces that you've read at Misery Loves Company, like period. So first of all, I the first thing that jumped out at me is like what a great like continuity of theme this is. Like from the last piece you read, the 2001 piece, right? Like you're dealing with many of the same themes here, but I think in this piece they're even more fleshed out, they're even more vivid, they're even more effectively illustrated by just like shockingly like both profound and hilarious details, right? And what I really love about this piece is how it's structured. And this is in some way similar to the 2001 piece. Like, I love the fact that you start out like in the evolutionary past. Like, you start off with like a sense of like deep like biological history, right? You go backwards in time before you go forwards in time, which I think just like the way that Kubrick does it in 2001 is uniquely effective here because you're like grounding the reader in your humanity and in their humanity before you leap forward into this dystopian future where all of that shit is like alienated from you, right? Where all the like basics of like simple human touch and interaction have been abstracted out and have been like kind of like absorbed into this virtual reality and all but man all the fucking the details of that final third of the poem, there is the feet pics for Netflix line is a killer. That's like uniquely hilarious. And oh, there are so many great moments in the poem that are like tied to contemporary and like burgeoning technology in a way that's just wonderfully creative and effective, I think. So it's a great poem, Bizarre. Um, and hey, you know what? I
I,
hear that some publication just opened submissions today. So
oh
I know
boy,
that
who?
maybe you already submitted to that publication, but who
So
knows? Anyway,
Bizarre,
Rudy.
that plushies as a service line, which it might actually already be
Yes.
like a true thing. That's so good. Like, please don't let them take Pussy Destroyer. Oh, wait,
Hello.
that's so fucking good. I love it. Hello.
Thank you. Yeah, I just was kind of like thinking about all of these very eccentric details in like modern life and how they're sort of like becoming abstract, but also like very much tangible objects, and just the way that
Mhm.
those things become commodified and yet they're still like so meaningful to us, just sort of like playing around with that idea. And then like the thing that I don't know, something that really stands out to me with this poem that I liked was the swipe up to send a fleet of Boston Dynamics dogs to your state senator's house.
Fuck
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah, no, that's a great lie.
I just had fun with that one. I thought I'd drop it in there, but thank you for the commentary.
Yeah, thank you, Bizarre. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
oh, hey, somebody's shitting in
Oh,
a
here
cup.
we go. Here
Oh
we
yeah,
go.
William, I have to shitting for you.
All right. Thank you,
Yum.
Bizarre. Rudy, you might as well stay unmuted because you are
Oh,
up next.
okay. Uh, so I'm gonna. Oh, somebody.
Oh, are there still more? I don't
I think Taylor is Taylor. Oh, I see.
is
Not our Taylor.
I see. I see.
Somebody being sneaky here.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I don't know.
Them
But
boys. Okay, he's
oh, you
taken care of.
got rip. So I'm gonna read a couple things and play a sound bite. So this one that first one I'm gonna read is called "The Good of the Human Race." Yeah, this is more Looney Tunes shit. This is about some more Looney Tunes characters that were I decided to flesh out into humans, so I decided to make them even more caricatured. The good of the human race. As part of his sweeping policy extravaganza, the archmean of Oxford University, FPS Doug, took a controversial position on gender inclusivity and safety on campus, one that some would later claim was taken out of context by bad actors to incite unrest. He said, "What can I say? There's nothing like the rush of hunting people down and killing them. I mean, my heart's beating, my hands are shaking, but I'm still shooting, I'm still getting the headshots, and I'm still fucking like boom, headshot, boom, headshot, boom, headshot." Elspeth Teller, the head of the Gender Studies Department, worked closely with her peers to determine how to best act on this. Teller, renowned for her women first and gender critical beliefs, was often referred to by the moniker AstroTurf because she was a psychotic bigot who walked around in a 1950s style fishbowl helmet, and because she could possess the bodies of trans people or any people by infecting them with a parasite that she had brought home from a space mission. At this moment in history, Elspeth's team needed a W, whereas more ambitious humanities departments like the tenured grave robbers and archaeology were known for stealing tangible cultural resources. The gender studies department at Oxford was seen by many, citation needed, weasel words, as nothing but a safe house for petty spotlight thieves who made inept attempts to Ocean's 11 the public eye whenever possible. These constant attention heists were rarely successful and led to criticism from scornful STEM academics, the loudest of whom was Chief Tinkerer Roberta K. Rat, nom de guerre Mousetrap, a trans woman and member of the Order Rodentia with everything to prove. Rat was cautiously optimistic about the statement, her words, and encouraged her colleagues to deploy informational countermeasures and bring von Neumann constructor levels to full strength in order to quickly spool up laboratory production. Not her words. Definitely. The stage was set for a showdown, and when I say that, I say it in the Soul Calibur announcer's voice. Mere days after the statement, AstroTurf played her opening. The front page of the University Times, a newspaper that spun rapidly into view and never stopped spinning, read, Archmean declares war on pedosexual autogynophiles. This is because AstroTurf, through parasitosis enabled by lax quarantine measures, literally controlled the student body and its feelings and actions, and by extension, its student press. Obviously, most tenured staff who lived on the hill far above the campus housing had managed to avoid infection. Violence against trans femmes increased 1,400% within 2 days of the headline, an alarming statistic that made certain watchdogs, Cerberus et al., say, awooga, while their eyes popped out of their heads. Turfs quickly pointed out that the wave of destruction was apparently self-inflicted, citing overwhelming medical evidence. Technically, this is true, said an infected trans woman as she perched atop a sculpture of Sheila Jeffries to await predation by the turf-bang twitterwing, a large invasive bird of prey. But the forces of science and reason were not to be outdone. They quickly picked up on statistics from the underworld chief of logistics that said, in layman's terms, since I don't have the degrees, Masonic or otherwise, to read the data, guys, hell is almost full. This, they established, could be weaponized. STEM faculty designed a disease that rapidly killed gender-critical feminists, and occasionally, for unknown reasons, the homeless, hoping to counter AstroTurf's philosophical zombies by unleashing a torrent of science-based undead. The infection vector was Engagicus melliferinum, a symbiotic brainworm native to the social media realm that happened to be most common among people who hated men in dresses or whatever. The normal life cycle of E. melliferinum allowed for dopamine release whenever negative feelings were engaged with inside SOCMED echo chambers, as explained through animated pictograms by Mousetrap. The various traps of negative engagement on these platforms were seeded with modified worms designed to kill those who dared taste the sweet nectary hate bait, punishing bad takes with death. As armies of dwarf-like women with bobs jackhammered like on J.K. Rowling's latest #NotOurCrimes wall, they were in fact digging in too deep, unaware of the lethal entities that dwelled just beyond that coveted threshold of virality. Thousands died for argument's sake, and the national press asked, for God's sake, how much is too much, and eventually hell itself overflowed. Unfortunately, is too often the case as with science, the scientists had acted without asking, should we, or even what are the consequences of this? I mean, actually, they pretty much acted with complete detached insanity, not even asking the basic questions of, can we control these zombies, or why exactly are we doing this again? As scandals took a bite out of Mousetrap's H-index, and the frothing dead took several bites out of AstroTurf's AstroTurf base, the two enemies agreed to put aside their feud for the good of the human race, or as the University Times put it, the good of the human wraiths, since 90% of all people on Earth were now zombies of some kind. Oxford hosted a debate between the two intellectual giants, hoping for one last clout hurrah. But how, the marketing madmen who sponsored the event mused, can we go biggest? Advertising and TV rankings unfolks became obsessed with the so-called last real niggas on the planet demographic that encompassed people from Madagascar, a country that had gone relatively untouched by parasites and undeath because of the fact that all the author knows about Madagascar is informed by the Newgrounds.com flash game Pandemic. As the debate dragged on, and words did the twist, and tempers flared like white phosphorus weapons, and the moderators asked the esteemed guests questions of mice and men, something weird happened. Nobody gave a shit. 0% viewership, total flop. Mostly, the people of Madagascar were doing Madagascar things and didn't give a damn what two shithead Western scholar sociopaths who almost blew up the world were preening about. The president of the small island nation didn't even have to say, shut down everything. Boom! Headshot! FBS Doug shouted, standing behind his own dead body as a ghost after heroing with a shotgun. Free from the shackles of academic life, he could dance all day, he could dance all day, he could dance all day. And he did. That one is the first one. Gonna read another one here. Oh, excuse me. This one is called The House of the Rising Sun. Again, more cartoon characters. The House of the Rising Sun. To be initiated into the Dead to Rights gang, you can be jumped in if you're the type of nigga who loves pain, fucked in if you're a female, or hexed in. Ventrese chose the last option, which meant that she had to go to the haunted house where the Chinaman who could turn finger guns into Colt 45s lived with his ghost family. Mr. Hayashi, the Tree Street Shogun. The at-risk youth was shaking in her Nike Air Jordans when the leader of the gang pointed at the dwelling, a Frankenshack that combined Edo period sensibilities with motifs from random boarded-up houses in Detroit. The yard was a master class in uncivil engineering and a fenced-in concentration camp for various dogs that, despite their different states of neglect, were federated in their hatred of outsiders, especially black teenagers. Woof. Ventrese looked at the sign on the front gate, which might as well have said Abrit Mockfrey to her, but actually said beware of dog or something similar, she thought, because it had a picture of a dog on it. The letters triggered her sensate hyper-emergent extra-sensitive exclusionary integral tetranominitis, shit, which made them spontaneously animate, leap out of the sign, and start whooping her ass. After the 5'0" girl caught a right hook from the burly capital B that looked like Mike Tyson, justified, she tumbled over the fence into the domain of the biggest, meanest, most nigger-bitingest dog whose name tag said Trayvon, but don't look now. The W was the compassionate one of the group. He flew up in the air and started dropping punctuation bombs all over the yard, periods to halt the advance of the doggos that were mobilizing to tear Ventrese apart, exclamation marks to perch above their heads of the gathered gang members because, like, holy fuck, and even the occasional number sign to double as a hashtag whenever the viral video of this went up on WorldStar. WorldStar! That's when a shot rang out from the top window, situated just below the Iramoya. A bullet sprinted into a gangbanger's head, putting him not so gently onto the ground with eyes rolled back. As his brains made like frustrated Soviet intellectuals during the 1990s, the bullet's impact started a relay race of panic that dashed between the gathered kid adults. They hauled the fuck out of that little cul-de-sac like they were Shinto embodiments of the Ghostface Killer song, Run. Zippity-doo-dah. Shogun Hayashi blew off his smoking finger. Ventrese fainted. Upon waking, she found herself in an old study, books everywhere, dressed in the costume of a Japanese imperial princess, which is a culture and not a costume, except when it specifically is being used for costuming purposes by a pathological historical reenactor sex pest who likes to dress up young girls for his amusement. Shogun bowed deeply and addressed Ventrese in Japanese, a language that was as nonsensical to her as the concepts found in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland were to the parents of Alice Little. After being cordial, he put his gun in her mouth, which definitely could mean that he put his fingers in her mouth. Weird. And could mean additionally weirder things depending on how you chose to imagine the author is referencing Full Metal Jacket. He whispered into her ear, okay, now it's becoming the second kind of weird, while gesturing to the books. He plucked one of them from the shelf, an English translation of Yukio Mishima's Confessions of a Mask, then pointed to the tome in a way that suggested, you must read this now, or be assailed by 117 ghosts. Somehow. When she looked away, the aging Japanese patriarch started bending his thumb downward. Beads of sweat pooled on Vantrease's temple. She sighed, then nodded in agreement. The three hardest words on the inside cover of the translation, which are Dostoevsky, Karamazov, and Sodom, approached Vantrease with rolling fists like they were rushdown characters pulled from a technical literary fighting game with awful controls. Shogun, laughing with delight, was Shang Tsung and Sun Tzu and Hideki Tojo kit-bashed into a barely fleshed-out wireframe of Orientalism. Vantrease put her middle and pointer fingers together to attack because she had seen this move in a kung fu movie once. Shogun quirked a brow, then nodded, giving her a thumbs up. Instinctively, Vantrease knew what to do. She cocked her thumb, then cocked it again with a verbal k. The old patriarch howled in delight or malice, who can know, then narrowed his eyes. Vantrease danced around blows from the Russian aggressors, pointing confidently, and with each gesture a discharge. Chunks of letters were thrown against the walls as the force that terrorized battlefields ancient and modern was loosed against them. Kabang! Boom! Dra! When Vantrease had dispatched them, she felt as though she had summited a great mountain. She turned to bow politely to Shogun, but he had already disappeared, and the house lights were turning off. The whites of Vantrease's eyes were the last thing visible. She was afraid of the dark. All right, so now I am going to have a special guest reader read this next one. You might know him from such programs as Waco in 1993. His name is David Koresh. And this is going to be a story in a similar vein. Obviously, it's cartoon shit. But yeah, so anyway.
The 2.7424657534244658 Arabian Years. When Ash felt depressed, she cried enough tears to rehydrate all of the deserts in Arabia. This unfortunately did not drown all the Jews there because they were really good at building boats and rising above the tides. One night, Ash was so depressed that she pulled an anvil out of her pocket and jumped into the sea of her own melancholy. Amir, partly out of self-preservation, but mostly out of being a good friend, de-escalated the situation by opening his mouth and doing metalcore renditions of Quranic verses, something that made Ash stim excitedly. He coaxed her out of the salty depths, then encouraged her to get help. Ash resisted at first, but like a Middle Eastern underdog nation succumbing slowly to the military and technological might of a globally sanctioned aggressor that employs necropolitical fascist geostrategy, she eventually decided to pick up her Nokia 105 cell phone and dial the suicide hotline. A woman with a soft voice answered. She identified herself as Scheherazade, then asked Ash for her name. Ash, who had taken up cigarettes, blew a thick cloud of smoke into the phone receiver. Scheherazade got a face full of the young terrorist, and it settled on her like the people dust that fell from the North and South World Trade Center towers. She furrowed her brow and nodded and listened. It was only a matter of time before Ash started crying into the phone, so Scheherazade, industrious and prepared for anything, put on a life jacket. Eventually, two hands reached through the line and grasped to strangle her, annoyed by the ego check of prevailing level-headedness. Ash hung up furious. 2 minutes later, she called back, vibrating Scheherazade's ringer with a ferocity that made it sing an opera dirge, one of those where the Nordic dudes performing it always sound fucking angry. Ash poured all her cruelty and malice into the ring, a less powerful Sauron striving to exert control in her middling earth. But Scheherazade answered with the Xanax calm, allowing the embers of her client's temper to simply burn up her eyebrows. When Ash had been worn down by the attrition of kindness, when she was reduced to slurs and a couple sobs, Scheherazade reached into the receiver and started to tug upon the younger woman's ear, entering it with her voice as though it was a cave of wonders. And behold, it was. A thought bubble billowed up from Ash's head, and in it was painted the grandest collage of fictions and realities, and might-bes and could-bes, a pasture so green that it made Ash Hamas green with envy over this alternate self-portrait being constructed. Her, but better than where she was at right now, in this lonely desert. Her, but with some purpose besides scimitaaring Jews. Her, contented in some posh, cozy mine castle, free from the over-under of stimulation needs, and the castle has cats in it, and a flaming fire that watches her in love instead of in ambush. Such beauty. A land where little at leasts and could be worses were blooming like King Cotton. There was so much cope in this land, honestly, that the smiley locals were rolling it up and spitting it. And when Scheherazade had finished the tale, Ash felt better. She felt understood. She thanked Scheherazade for the stay of execution and hung up. Ash hugged Amir, so herself, then went to sleep. The fade to black of darkness wasn't menacing, it was just darkness. But the next night, as she wound down in bed, the dark had stars in it, artifacts. A reversal of the concept of black pixels on a television that she couldn't bring herself to watch due to the constant glare. The next night, more stars. Then on nights that followed, the black was teeming with them. In time, she was inconsolable again. One night, the stars reached critical mass and marched into the same ear that Scheherazade had bent. They started fissioning up negativity like little Los Alamos scientists stealing pieces of the sun to throw at the Japanese. To douse the light, Ash rolled up her sleeve, carved a tunnel into the flesh on her arm with a razor, and then walked into it, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but neither do your thoughts when you're depressed as fuck. Amir tried to follow, but when he did, it wasn't a tunnel. It was just flayed skin. He wrapped around the wound tight, soaking up the blood so that vampires couldn't prey on his friend. And inside Ash's tunnel, the bright light of a train.
Holy shit, man. First of all, that I know you've done like AI voice work and stuff with pieces before, but this shit is getting scary good. Like, given like there are not that many vocal recordings of David Koresh out there to work with, right?
There's not a lot. This one is taking from the Voice of Fire album that somebody put out after his death. It was from like a sermon that he had given. And that's the part that I stole and used for this. And yeah, there's not a whole lot, and most are pretty low quality. But Voice of Fire, I guess, was produced by this guy, who somebody had sent him a tape of David Koresh, one of the Mount Carmel or Cameron, whatever it was, the Waco people, the Branch Davidians had sent him something, and he had produced a studio recording of it. And so there was a high quality sample, so I picked that one and used it for Koresh. And he's preaching, he's getting into it, so it's kind of like a recording of him that's not like the other choice I had was like one of the FBI interrogators, trying to negotiate with them on the
Right.
phone. But that seemed a little too manic for this piece. So it was
Yeah,
like,
no. And that's the thing that's amazing to me is that, like, tonally it was such a good match for the piece, right? Like, and in a way that's really fascinating to me because it's easy to use that, well, it's not easy, but it's one thing to use it as a joke, right? Like, but like there's such like pathos in his voice when he's reading that, and it's so fitting for a piece that really that is perhaps a little more somber than especially of your Idealarcs pieces, right?
Right.
That's very much about like mental illness and the like literally magical thinking that we engage in to like
Yeah.
protect ourselves from mental illness.
No,
And so
definitely.
David Koresh is like a great choice for that, but I'm surprised by just how like the vocal inflection and just how much like like the weird level of actual humanity present in that recording, right? um
Yeah.
I will say, man, I loved all three of these pieces. I really, really like what you're doing with the Idealarcs pieces now. Like the Manic Looney Tunes energy is so appropriate for this world that you've built. And and the first one is just fucking sublime because it like that is such a like nothing but that kind of cartoon Looney Tunes energy really effectively captures how like completely unhinged like what passes for like intellectual discourse like public intellectual life is today, right? Like the complete collapse of any kind of like staid or nuanced or like sophisticated intellectual reality and the way it's been replaced by like social media, like public people who would in like other generations have gone on like Charlie Rose or something and like are now like
Right.
deranged lunatics on Twitter, like people with
Yeah.
PhDs and MDs after their name are now just posting absolutely unhinged shit. And the way that you get at that in the piece, like the way that the just like complete escalating insanity of it was just like really funny and effective. And I love the Madagascar line. That slew me because that's pretty much all I know about Madagascar.
That
Like, um,
that's all yeah, pandemic, let's go. Fucking
I remember that game
congregate,
still.
Newgrounds, yeah.
Um, and the same is true of your second piece as well, the Shogun piece. It has that same like perfectly manic Looney Tunes energy, the same silliness about it, and it's just such a perfect it's just so perfectly well suited for the world that you've created otherwise. And like it's the shit where the like she can barely read, but the letters come to life and attack her instead. And then just all and just the way you describe things, like the way you were describing him like whispering to her and the like insidiousness of that and like the different ways it could be taken was just very funny, I think, and very effective. It was all very all really good. And the third piece I really love, like after you would accept like establish this like manic like slapstick cadence with the first two,
Yep,
it was
that one kind of,
such like change of pace. It was
yeah.
such a tonal shift in a way that I think is really effective, and also that shows the range of what you're doing here, right, man?
That one I wrote first on a really bad day, and then I wrote these other two to kind of offset it, I guess. But yeah,
That one
yeah,
has
thanks.
powerful written on a really bad day energy. uh,
Thanks.
yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
buddy.
man. And Kat is up next.
Okay, am I unmuted now? I was
You
having
are
trouble.
unmuted now, yes.
Cool. Um, so that link, yeah, this is from 2019. I'm not going to be reading from that link because there's footnotes in that link and they're like a pain in the ass to read. So if there's stuff I don't read, that's why I'm reading it off a Word doc because otherwise I was gonna not be able to do it. So this is like from a few years ago, and the reason I'm reading it is because I had like so many conversations in the past week that ended with me bringing this thing up that I wrote. And it just seemed, I was like, oh, I should read this, and it seemed weird that I hadn't read it. So this is called That Cereal Honey. I met Koji on a 2D side-scrolling MMORPG called Maple Story back in around 2008. I was in 7th grade going into 8th. Looking back, that summer was a very special sweet spot, the exact point of diminishing returns between freedom and responsibility, after which the demands of my time would only increase. The following summers would either be taken up by work or poisoned by a deeply troubling undercurrent of shame at my lack of productivity. but this summer marked the first time I had enough interiority for my free time to feel interesting, and perhaps the last time it would be socially acceptable, if not celebrated, to vegetate around the house for multiple days, doing nothing but melt in the heat. Being only 13 at the time, I failed to see this chunk of time for what it was. In fact, I mostly resented having nothing to do but sit in front of my family's computer, eating Hot Pockets and El Monterey taquitos and trying to get my archer to level 30. So when I met Koji on a boat traveling between MapleStory continents one summer afternoon, I was more thrilled than perhaps was appropriate. Sure, I was still just playing a video game alone in the nook off my parents' living room, but communicating with someone else immediately galvanized it for me. I've always had this thing where I never really felt like I was doing anything, almost like I didn't exist, unless someone was interacting with me. Talking to Koji made my solitude feel less pathetic and more purposeful, like I was having some sort of measurable net effect on the world around me. We hit it off and he added me to his guild, and suddenly I had what felt like a decent approximation of a group of friends. Of course, it wasn't long before I made him my boyfriend. Looking back, I'm not even really sure what made us originally start talking or what we even talked about. I do remember that we both listened to the Shins, which may have been the only actual interest outside of MapleStory that we shared. I used to send him poems that I wrote, and he pretended to understand what I meant, and we both pretended that either one of us knew anything about poetry. I found that even that mostly shallow sort of interaction made me feel less alone than most people I knew in meat space. Besides, he apparently lived outside of Pittsburgh, and the fact that he lived in the same state as me made him seem more real somehow. Once he messaged me to let me know he'd written a poem about me on a Taco Bell napkin and typed it up for me in the in-game chat. For years, I had it memorized and kept it close to me because for years, it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done in my honor. In 2018, I have it scrawled on the front cover of an old diary from middle school that I pull out from time to time just to laugh at it because it is fucking hilarious. Just wishful thinking, the girl whose mere grunts form poems. That's cereal, honey. For every word that spills from her lips, my heart feels like a pool at the bottom of a waterfall. The other guys in the guild were cool as well, but they never meant as much to me as Koji did, and we didn't really keep in touch. They were all roughly 16 to 20 years old, including Koji, and I spent much of my time trying to throw off the scent of someone significantly younger and more innocent than they were. Even Koji, who was 16 at the time, thought I was at least in high school, and as a result, I was privy to a lot of stories he and the guild guys would have hopefully been uncomfortable telling a naive middle schooler. For instance, one of the older guys told me about a time an old girlfriend's parents once caught him fucking her mid-orgasm in their house, and then proceeded to lie to them that his visible ejaculation stains were actually him pissing himself from fear. In exchange, I told him the story of the time part of my bathing suit came loose and I had a minor wardrobe malfunction on Assateague Beach. He then proceeded to let me know there were probably a lot of boners on the beach that day, a statement that flattered my underage mosquito bite tits off back in 2008 and now sends me cringing into a singularity. I took all of this as a sign that I was becoming one of the guys, that I was making some real impression on Koji and his friends. I started to imagine a real future together, both of us meeting in the middle of Pennsylvania and falling in love in real life, and somehow inviting all of our guild friends to the wedding. It was, at the time, the closest approximation of deep love I could muster. And then he went on vacation. It would only be for a week, he explained, and he would be back online as soon as he got home. None of that mattered to me. I was already crushed, already abandoned. My unexpectedly soul-filling summer was screeching to a halt before my eyes, and I didn't even bother trying to hide my devastation. We may have only been in an internet relationship, but Koji knew me well enough to reassure me using metaphor. Pretend's the gold rush, he said, and I'm heading out west to go make us some money. But pretend when I get back, it'll be even better than gold. It'll be diamonds. 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 I held on to his words for the next few days, pulling myself to remain optimistic in light of my sudden loneliness. I believed he meant it, that things would be even better than expected when he did eventually return. But without someone to talk to every day, a person to revolve my life around, I was quickly sucked back into myself, restless and paranoid. What if he didn't come back? What was he doing right now? Was he thinking about me? When would we be together? A few days turned into a week into two, and when he still hadn't returned as promised, I spiraled even deeper. For a few more weeks, I tried to resume my typical MapleStory activities. They weren't nearly as exciting without Koji to share them with, but they were the closest thing I had to a routine. I felt like a widow. I didn't know how else to fill my day. With no way of contacting him outside of the game, all I could do was open up our chat window every few hours, searching for some sign he'd logged on at least for a minute or two. I reached the point where I didn't even care if he talked to me again. I just wanted stimulus, input, some sign that he was still generally himself, or even still existed. I asked the guild guys about him, but they didn't know him any better than I did, and eventually got tired of my questioning. With no other leads, I resorted to Googling his MapleStory username with surprisingly revelatory results. First of all, I noticed that in addition to the Pinpoint account that I had come to know and have weird cartoon lust for, there are a variety of other Pinpoint accounts with a variety of distributions of N's and T's, presumably also operated by Koji. The MapleStory website had a listing of all the players and their stats, and it seemed as though these other iterations had been abandoned at lower levels, leading me to wonder what had led Koji to keep creating new accounts. I also noticed that he had not stopped at Pinpoint, as there appeared to be usernames with even more N's and T's, Pinpoint with 3 N's and 3 T's, etc., that had also been abandoned at early levels. This suggested that at some point Koji had toyed with creating a new version of his MapleStory persona, then regressed back to the one he'd used to meet me. I couldn't help but wonder if I was the reason for his attachment. Second of all, Koji had a YouTube account that I was able to locate using the names of one of his many failed Pinpoint experiments. The channel mostly featured videos of MapleStory gameplay, but there were a few shoddy recordings of him and presumably his younger brother doing weird outdoorsy things, like blowing up and destroying things in their backyard. Sitting in the nook off the living room late at night, cicadas screeching through the windows, I sat in a frog squat on the computer chair, mining each one for small details about Koji and his life. He had a younger brother who seemed to be around my age, the irony. Wherever he lived, his family seemed to have a lot of land, and he was chillingly boyish, judging by his interest in doing recklessly destructive experiments in his parents' backyard. Strangely, the revelation of his appearance was low on the list of my concerns. I remember thinking he was normal looking, not the sort of stereotypical pained expression emo boy I would have had a crush on in those days, but not prohibitively nerdy or weird looking, the way I'd secretly feared he would be. These details both galvanized my ideas about Koji and alienated me from them. The more I came to discover about him, the more I missed him, and yet it became increasingly clear that we knew relatively little about each other, and I began to feel silly for pinning so many of my hopes to him, both for the summer and for much further in the future than I would like to admit. It took me around 2 months, practically the rest of the summer, to accept that Koji probably wasn't coming back, and by accept I may acknowledge his absence, then use the heartache as fuel for this ultra-horrible poem. Where are you? Don't you miss me? Didn't you say I was your everything? I thought we could do anything, so why didn't you say goodbye? I waited, I really did, but I can't wait like this forever. I need you now, not this summer, not a few months from now, not tomorrow. You said we were on a carriage ride out west, that this was a bump in the road, that at the end there wouldn't be gold, there'd be diamonds. But all I see is that stupid poem you wrote me. I'm sick of seeing it every time I open up my notebook to write. It's not good enough anymore. Come find me. Please just come find me. Despite all of the angst it entailed, I don't remember exactly how long his absence lasted, only that at some point during my 8th grade year he reappeared and explained that he had contracted Lyme disease on a family trip to Presque Isle and then fell out of the routine of playing. I showed him my shitty poem and he apologized for worrying me. He also gave me his AIM screen name so we could continue to keep in touch, regardless of our commitment to the game. Around this time, he also informed me that Koji wasn't his real name, hence the quotes, and that he used it in-game to seem more interesting and skilled as a player. I won't share his real first name here, and last name here, even though they're extremely generic, because I'm already towing the line as it is, and this guy and I still interact once a year on Instagram. In some ways, I finally got what I had always wanted, some information that placed Koji outside the context of MapleStory, something that gave me more access to him, almost like someone I knew in real life. But things were never the same between us as they were that summer. We kept in touch, but he wasn't as crazy about me as he'd been before, and I was busy with school. I largely stopped playing MapleStory and focused much of my internet time on trying to nurse my extremely tumultuous and pathetic relationship with a real-life crush. Then at some point, he interrupted a conversation to let me know he had met a girl at his school and that he wanted to ask her out. Whatever story was done. I said something like, yeah, even though that wasn't remotely true, and nobody was going to date me, let alone be genuinely interested in me for at least another year. For a while, we still talked, then we talked once in a while, then we didn't talk at all. I stopped using AIM at the beginning of high school, when I finally got a Facebook account and migrated most of my communication to Messenger. As a result, I lost touch with Koji for around 5 years until I randomly decided to add him on Facebook one summer between college semesters. To my surprise, he accepted my request and we caught up over the course of a couple days. Unlike me, he'd opted not to go to college and found himself a pretty well-paying job as a programmer, only for that to fall through a year or two later. At the time, he was working as a toll booth operator until he could find something else to do. That's the most we've talked since I was in middle school. We're mutuals on Instagram, and I think about 6 months ago, he told me one of my outfits, camo shirt, orange jacket, combat boots, look nice. Sometimes he'll DM me or Snapchat me a video of himself listening to the all too familiar MapleStory soundtrack, panning over to the grin on his face. And in those moments, it feels like we're sharing something special, certainly generationally unique, but also unique to us. And a cute nostalgia over something that's both universal and completely obscure, a connection so small and so fleeting and almost aches, like we're touching hands through a thick pane of glass. That's all I got.
This is this is an authentically heartbreaking piece, Kat. This is no, I've said this about your work before, I think, but you have a unique capacity for capturing this kind of bittersweet nostalgia in your writing, and it's really on full display here. And what I love about this piece, though, is it would be so easy for it to just be a piece about like a childhood online romance, right? And for your focus to be on like how small it was and how like trite your feelings were and how out of like step it was with like adult human relationships. But instead like this piece becomes like it becomes like a microcosm or like a diorama or something of like what real human adult relationships look like, right? Like it's like the whole thing in miniature, but also the whole thing at a level of emotional intensity that's really hard to come by as an adult. And the contrast there, like the like nuanced and sophisticated way between the nuanced and sophisticated way that this relationship is presented and the like gung ho like childhood like naivete and emotional intensity makes this piece like uniquely effective and gets at what I think a lot of the great writing about adolescence does, right? Like instead of putting you at a distance from that time, it brings you back there and it makes you feel that, like I said earlier, that bittersweet nostalgia, that like yearning for the lost thing. So this is a wonderful piece, Kat, and thank you for
Thank
sharing it.
you.
And Jan is up next, and or Rudy reading for Jan. And judging by the title to this piece, I think we've got a theme going tonight. But oh, Jan's
Oh,
warging.
oh, I feel it. I feel it. I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord. So this is a Jan piece that I'm being warged to read. Now, the piece is titled excuse me, "A Computer That Molests You." Between the living room and kitchen is a computer that molests you. It sweats through dial-up text and thousands of miles of wire in the sky that wrap around your thin neck. America is online and it wants to fuck you so bad. Age is something you lie about, and not very well. 12 and 15 are the same. Sex is something other people take from you. Location gets your corpse dumped in a landfill where you belong. Your corpse is beautiful enough for a plausible life sentence. The prologue to the rest of your life is a hot night in the season of locusts, where you learn that no is an ugly word and that yes is always easier. True love is a Department of Defense contractor in Star Trek cosplay who shows you hardcore porn of Bugs Bunny eating piles of steaming shit. True love is your first boyfriend, 4 years older, role playing incest girl on IRC. True love is, do you have a webcam? I want to see you. Can I see you in your underwear? True love is named John, and John is sweet and nice to you and wants to strip the skin from your kneecaps with a razor blade. True love is saying, I love you, to an idea that wants to kill you.
So, first of all, I've been told that I kicked the real GG, but his mic was unmuted, and there was like I thought it might be GG, but his mic was unmuted, and there was a lot of audio coming out of it.
Oh
So
no, poor
whoever's in
GG.
conversation with the real GG, please give him my apologies. I didn't mean to do that. But motherfucker needs to mute his mic when he comes in here in the middle of the reading. Okay. Holy shit. Holy shit. So, I I want to be clear that like as far as I know, there was like absolutely no coordination to get this piece and Cat's piece back to back. This is like pure serendipity. But it's fucking remarkable to me the degree to which this piece is the inverse of that piece, right? Like that if Cat's piece like really shone a light on the like the like the like degree to which online relationships can be like just as heartfelt and just as meaningful as real life relationships, especially when you're young. This piece does quite the opposite. No, this is a uniquely bleak and terrifying look at online love, right? Like on being groomed, on being fucking molested over the internet. And it is so starkly and viciously written. It is I mean, the title alone, right? A computer that molests you. It's so it's like so concisely written. And it is like not like it's so restrained, and yet there's so much like nasty, ugly, heartbreaking, vicious energy to this piece. So many uniquely ugly details, and like the emotional undercurrent of it too. Like the idea that this is on some level like the degree to which you go to like convince yourself that this is a thing that you want or that you're receptive to or that's okay, like the way that this puts in like stark relief the like psychological manipulations, not only that like others will put you through, but that you are able to like put yourself through in order to rationalize this shit. I fucking love that line near the end, or the final two lines, right? True love is saying I love you to an idea that wants to kill you. The idea like of taking the selfless love concept to an extreme, to a deeply pathological extreme. The way this poem handles that is, I think, uniquely effective. And man, the whiplash of seeing those two pieces back to back, the holy fuck. Yeah, just more brilliant work, Jan.
Yeah, I want to say I like the way the title itself places it like in that it places you into a frame of like reference, well not reference, but it places you into like a frame of mind to understand like the concept. It's like a computer that molests you. It takes the like agency or whatever you want to call it away from like all the rapists, and puts it into the framework of like, well, it's just something that happened on the computer, right? It's just something that happened online. When like those are real things, real scenarios and shit are really happening. But it takes it, and that's a attitude that exists. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's an attitude that still exists. But that's really fucking cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
So, I didn't want to ask this immediately after that last piece because of the emotional tenor of that piece. But I believe Jan also wrote a few haikus. I, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm scrolling frantically to try to find the haikus.
Jan, can you put the haikus back in the chat?
Oh, I think I found one. Okay, yeah, you can put those back down. Oh, okay. I think I found one of them here. I'm scrolling, looking, scrolling. It starts with the Gigi one, right? Oh, wait.
Oh wait, and Jan
Oh, I
also
see it.
has
I found it.
another thing, it looks like.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna start with the gorillas one. Gorillas are cool. A silverback gorilla. Such anal delights. Next one. Gay Arab man shout, "Stop drinking my urine, Jan." Subway riders scared. I think there's one more actually. Oh, here it is. Oh, Gigi's not here. Rip. Gigi Rowland gay. Korean man is racist. Racist and a gay. So now I'm gonna scroll back down here. Or is it Christmas one too? Oh, okay. Looking for the Christmas one. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this one is titled another Jan Snick piece titled one of the Christmas poems I improvised in my twin brother for 3 consecutive hours. Tee hee hee, giggle with glee, for soon there will be many presents for me. The boy has come from far away, and I must say, he is very gay. Gay as in homosexual, not as in happy. The boy's foul visage is very crappy. A freak is the boy, smoking foul grass. Once he was seen staring at a bulldog's ass. Bestiality is his sin, and I shall put him in the ground. For the boy, his version of Tinder is the city pound. If I could snap my fingers, I would, but I
Well,
can't.
thank you, Jan, for providing us with some comic relief following the previous poem. No, Jan, did you improvise the 3 haikus basically on the spot just now at the beginning of the reading? Yes, Jan says. Yeah, no, that's wild. I don't think even though they're like fundamentally jokes, I don't think I could write even a halfway competent haiku in 2 minutes. So that Jan says he excels at improvising disgusting rhymes. Indeed you do, Jan. Indeed you do. Anyway, and Gigi, if you're watching this wherever you are, I'm sorry, man. I really did think you were a troll. Anyway, moving on. Next up is Mark. And after that, Josh, if he ever shows up.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Perfectly.
Yep,
Yes?
you sound good. You sound good, Mark.
Okay. I'm going to read 3 poems tonight. They're shortish. The first one is titled Tennessee Williams Sings the Wimbledon Anthem. Diabetic feet and shins, polished, gleaming, hairless, white, sheathed in milk, chocolate, brown, stocking foot waders creased all the way down to toes. He no longer feels in the frigid stream. His nerve-damaged legs forking under an inner tube. The drag of black rubber fins, listless in current between the meanders, effervescent below his knees. The fly fisher whips a graphite rod back and forth over his shoulder, back and forth over his shoulder, like a flagellant penitent, paying out line to metallic squawks of the ratchet wheel and the clicking paw, neon orange high visibility filament oscillating sharply over his head, each undulation refining the impulse, increasing the speed until the rod tip loaded with stored energy, a frequency as waves unfurls along the weight forward taper. What hooks is too light to cast by design, so it kisses the surface of water above the trout. A shadow of roof beam slams through the channel that a sinuous stream recrosses the axis down valley a glacier withdrew from while crawling up into itself, erratic boulders in its wake, the outer banks carried off little by little will someday erode out from under, self-intensifying helical flow, a feedback loop, positive, swelling the amplitude as the vortex at the center of each cut bank gains momentum. Greater curvature results in greater erosion, which results in greater curvature. Abandoned meanders and oxbows, cut off loops left without an active cutting stream, ridge and swale topography in the wake of lateral migration scars the floodplain. Waveform of water moving over land makes of the nethermost crease in the channel a vertex. The glut of sugar in his blood, a perpetual spike his insulin can't blunt. The old fly fisher lost in the swarm of his hyperglycemia, bitterest torrent of gloom and delusion, ruminates future and past. The second one is titled Nose Tackle in Body Stocking Made of Mineral Tanned Hide, Flayed from the Tattooed Lady in a Mexican Circus. The proverbial ball and chain and ball, that's a player and coach, tethered together and fired from the heavy artillery barrel of art and full contact athletics. Circle like wrestlers before locking arms, minds clenched in a grapple, because a battle is won before it is fought. The binary code, that's the zero of athlete and impotent one of his coach, an intelligent brooding technician who watches the zero of nose guard, one of those short, squatty guys, almost impossible to stretch, his uniform as tight as he wears it, glued on his shoulder pads, antimicrobial circular knit of compression fabric, jersey numbers, bleary over buckles and eyelets of flak jacket, rib protector, gussets of fortified mesh gathered under a lattice of shoelaces crisscrossing all the way up to his armpits. The player trussed in his gear like a gimp suit. The dance around and toward one another, an emotional spiral, needle and hackle, spur and bridle, stalking the distance between them like boleadoras after swiftly moving legs of running game to wrap around, entangle, a pair of satellites winding through space, seeking an axis, the mass of a planet to bind and secure them in orbit with gravity until what drives the zero and one that are in reality two zeros in search of their one, because every ball is a sphere with space inside, space that's not a sphere. Countersinks an abstract combat chassis no one can see, driving the shaft of a strategy into the charged air of regional fandom, flush in the aerodynamically engineered hull that is tracing an arc over pickets just prior to this, bundled like the fabled arrows Motonari showed his sons, now unfurled as ammunition from a belt, crenellate battlement fed in a breach and disjoined, a relentless offensive machine gun advance. The other team's players observed from above and obsessively studied with all the religious devotion and zeal of a primitive tribesman converted by literal-minded dogmatic disciples, but under the cloak of an Asperger's stalemate of solitude, a hymn of scalloped tips weighted to hang as true as baleen ribs, and corset gluten-free seclusion where the bird-chested, hunch-shouldered one works ensconced in the conjugating prokaryotic dark. The last poem begins with a quotation. And the quotation is from a man named Caleb Summers. And Caleb Summers was the Okie Noodling Tournament champion in 2012. Now, I don't know if you know what noodling is. Basically, it's when you stick your arm down in a hole at the bottom of a river or lake, a hole for catfish. So catfish apparently burrow into the ground at the bottom of a lake or river. And when you noodle, you stick your arm down that hole and the catfish bites your arm and then you drag it up. And they do this for like catfish that are 2 or 3 or 4 feet long. So Caleb Summers was the Okie Noodling Tournament champion in 2012. And the quotation is, once they get to be a certain size, they're kind of a matriarch. The poem is titled, In a Trick Bag, You Done Put Me. Mom's probe and rangefinder jab mounts concurrently, both a defense and an offense, her great distance control taking his wind out of him, setting the pace from afar, her antenna extended to keep him awake while she rests in ethereal lassitude covered by insurance, corporate hoodlums bought low and sold high to only people who are able to afford it. Therefore, no irony. The dance not according to plan. So a lecture. Groaning joints tweak the pitch, push against crimped elastic sleeves of rastrum lines. Broad turtle shell lats and hips, buttocks, thighs, backs of knees fret a cruiserweight power chord before reverb snaps corner load back in play, danger, risk, stuck in the act as a passive participant once more. Attached thumb design misses count, smudge the wide angle fisheye of third eye, a peephole when somebody's knocking. For how long he's not sure, always having just awoken moments after the urgent knocking stops in the gelatin capsule of barrel distortion convexity, his hooking punches whirl, the 200 degrees of glass that's his field of view around, as instinct combined with genetics, scientifically or chemically rather surmounted, takes over, answers the eternal question of high performance versus torque. Twisting around on an axis of core, spine, his tensing abdominals stabilize, obliques flexing in tandem to rotate his arms that are bent at 90 degrees like the satellite view of a cyclone, and ratchet him fast in a collar and nut while he drives home a point, arguing with the version of himself who weighs 98 dripping wet pounds, coming home in torrential rain after law school at night. Lynn's flare obscured stalking yoked viewpoint, softened with wipes of petroleum jelly, light diffusing over gentle curve like surface tension. The killer pursues and eliminates all of the author's red herrings until only objective reality, worn as disguised by the woman he loves, remains for him to confront for both the first and last time. The final turn of plot masochistically unfolding for the author's proxy, a detective narrowing the field of suspects. Very important that he discover what exactly happened until the field stands finally empty, his noirish multiple selves proceeding to catch him in pop psychological crossfire.
Those were wonderful, Mark. Listening to this, and maybe I've said this before, but it made me think of like, like why, like what is the purpose of poetry in the first place, right? Like one of the fundamental purposes that poetry serves is to force us to view the mundane, the ordinary, the usual through a completely different light, through a completely different lens. And your poems consistently do that. It's not simply, you're not simply like dissecting reality, right? You're not simply like taking, like performing an autopsy on reality or whatever, like as I might have said before, but you are really like through your choices of metaphors and through the details you focus on, are forcing us to view things that are otherwise very normal, otherwise overlooked from a completely different perspective. I fucking adore the fly fishing poem because that's exactly what the fly fishing poem is doing. Like, and the way like you set the stage and initially like we all have this cliched vision of what fly fishing is, right? Like some old dude out on a river somewhere in a moment of perfect peace and serenity, the like sun is going down and he's just casting his line and he's experiencing a kind of like peace with himself and the world that we cannot begin to comprehend, right? And the way this poem completely and like subtly destroys that image, right? I love the like the casting of the fishing rod being compared to like medieval self-flagellation, right? Like and in that moment, the poem takes a real turn, and it becomes and that medieval like self-flagellation image is so fucking perfect because like not only does it change the tone from something like serene to something like pained. But why do the monks do that, right? Because they're in pursuit of this kind of inner peace, this kind of inner serenity through this act of like this act of violence, right? Through this act of self-abuse. And so the way that like you contrast the act of fishing like to that is it's just a beautiful, beautiful moment. But and then, like, you get in his gut, right? You get in his bloodstream. You get to the diabetes and the like insulin spikes and the all of the like coarse biological realities that prevent us from feeling at peace, right? Like the idea that we can be in this serene setting or whatever, but it doesn't fucking matter because like our bodies betray us. And the way you do it, it's like it's so subtle, it's gentle, it's meticulous, it's not like, ah, look at this irony, right? Like the irony
Right.
creeps up on
Right.
you, and it's really fucking effective, Mark. In fact, I think that's one of my favorite poems of yours that you've read here. So these are fantastic, man.
Thank you.
And Josh Sherman would be next. Josh, are you here? Are you here? No, Josh is not, as usual, Josh is not here. We can put him at the end of the night and he's still not here on time. So instead, Cletus couldn't be here, but he did want someone to read a poem of his. And I think Kat's going to read it for us.
Yeah. Okay, so this is called I'll Name My Kid Assault Rifle. My grandpa has an assault rifle because he is afraid someone will take his assault rifle. It's strapped on his chest at all times. When I stay overnight, I hear him whisper, "I love you," through the walls. I don't know if he's talking to the gun, a ghost, or himself. I hope he is talking to me. The next morning, cleaning his assault rifle in the kitchen, he's already eaten breakfast. When I die, you get my assault rifle. He pushes himself from the table, an 87-year-old who wields the newest in killing machines today. I love you too, Grandpa. I don't want to die a powerless husk unable to survive alone.
Holy shit. Cletus is killing it even when he's not here. Kat, thank you for reading that. You did a phenomenal job. And holy shit, this poem. I'm going to talk to Cletus about this because he sent us a couple of submissions and they're good, but I want this poem too. And maybe I'll see if we can take it from him. But oh my God, I love the when I say overnight, I hear him whisper, "I love you," through the walls. I don't know if he's talking to the gun, a ghost, or himself. That's so good. So good. I know he's not here to hear me talk about this poem, but I do want to talk about this poem for a minute because it does oh man, the way this unpacks the whole like gun ownership, like castle doctrine mindset is like so good because at first it seems like purely satirical. It's like oh my grandfather has a gun to keep people from stealing his gun, ha ha. And that's effective. Like that stands as so effective. But then like the way it gets at the things, the actual things that you might have a gun to protect, like the way it gets at the idea of family and the sense of home in this really like warped and dark, but also like oddly heartfelt way. Ah, it's such a good fucking poem. I'm so jealous of so jealous of him. Okay. Maybe we can maybe I will try to steal this. Anyway, um John. John. So John, just to be clear, we're forcing John to do this as an act of contrition. John John broke the misery tourism submission or submission guidelines. We said March 1st is the first day that we're going to be accepting submissions. And a few days beforehand, John sent us an email. And so with a submission, and so in order to atone, John is going to read that email now and he's going to share his submission with us. John, are you here?
Well, well. Well, well, it looks like misery tourism's back, huh? Looks like it's back from the dead. Except they forgot to mention one thing. Must have been buried in a certain pet cemetery because it seems it's come back evil. All right. First, I'm banned from misery tourism. Then Gigi's banned from misery tourism, and now Josh mysteriously disappears. Seems odd to me. Seems odd if you ask me.
That's right. We murdered Josh Sherman. Breaking news.
Just saying, something's going on. Anyway, out of courtesy, I knew they'd be getting a lot of emails, so I thought, I'd get this in early, just so they wouldn't have to, search through the slush pile, just try to do my part. But they banned me for it. But here's the email I graciously sent Misery Tourism, and then they spit on me for it. So it's titled Important Submission, Read This Emergency. Hey, Mystery Tourism editors. I don't know when your submission's open, but don't worry. You can just hold on to this poem and publish it when you open up. Thanks. A nice thing to say. You could hold on to it. Here's the haiku, my haiku. Poop from a man's butt splishes and splashes like a big fish in a small piss pond. After that, I wrote, I don't really know what you guys publish. I've never read the publication, but I'm always excited to help struggling indie publishers. My Venmo is John-P1 if you'd like to send the acceptance reward. And then after that, sincerely, John, smiley face. And I followed that up with a follow-up email. Hey, Mystery Tourism. When you publish the poem, whenever you open, kind of giving them free reign there. Could you actually change the last line to in a small toilet? So the poem reads, poop from a man's butt, splishes and splashes like a big fish in a small toilet. Sorry, I'm a bit of perfectionist. Just writer things, LOL. And I thought this was like a courtesy thing. I was going out of my way to be nice, but instead, I was told I was banned from ever publishing the Misery Tourism again. So I don't know. You add up the facts tonight. You tell me if you think Misery Tourism's gone evil or what.
I John, thank you. All is forgiven, John. You've atoned. You you're now welcome back in the pages of Misery Tourism anytime. Oh my God, John. I was like on the phone with Rudy when this email came through, and I was looking, and I got the pop-up notification from Gmail, and I was like, that motherfucker, John Padula, just just sent us a submission. And Rudy was like, what? Anyway, man, no, seriously, man, and all fucking irony and joking aside, that slew me and that made my day. So, so thank you.
Wait, but
Thank you for sharing it with us. Oh, Rudy.
I just want a little bit of analysis of the poem, like poop on a man's butt. Like, so, I mean, a lot of this poem, I think, can be drilled down to the idea of like pooping or shitting in a toilet, if you will. I mean, I guess I mean, you could take like a more like Marxist approach to it or whatever and say that like maybe it's about like resources or it's about like man the ability to have a toilet to shit in. You know, some people don't have a pot to piss in, to quote Karl Marx. I think he's the one who said that. But like this poem is really fascinating because it takes a lot of elements we know are interesting, like toilets and people's butts, and it combines them in a way that really gets at something that like a lot of people do when they're in the bathroom, which is shit. Um, so I mean, I think this is a really fascinating. I mean, I don't want to go on too long here, but I just think it's a poem that really captures the essence of shitting in a way that's really good.
Thank you. I really wanted to capture kind of the not not the irony, but the feeling that when you are pooping in a toilet,
Mhm.
there is a chance that, maybe you did eat fish, and for it to splish and splash in the toilet like, like
Yeah,
it was
no.
once. Yeah. So, dust to dust and all that. But I just wanted to really capture the cyclical nature because when poop gets flushed down the toilet, obviously it goes into the ocean and then becomes fish again. And so it's kind of
Oh, see, I didn't
yeah.
even pick up on that reference. I mean, when I was thinking of the splish or the splash thing, it goes splash. There's the song Splish Splash. I was taking a bath, on a
Yes.
Saturday night. I mean, so I was thinking of that reference. But also like just the idea of having the toilet like maybe splash on you a little bit, like it's like it comes back. The chickens come back to roost, right? I mean, maybe literally if you ate chicken.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's an interesting thing because splish splash, yeah, you think of a bathtub, but
Right,
splish
but it's
splash
actually a
from
toilet.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually
no,
a toilet.
that's one of the more profound, I think, realizations here is that a bathtub could also be a toilet in some situations, like an emergency situation where you don't have water or whatever. You could
Exactly,
literally just shit
exactly.
in a
And
bathtub.
a lot of people associate like a bathtub being clean, but like a toilet being dirty. And that's like completely baseless, because you could shit in a bathtub and bathe in a toilet. It's all a matter of perspective.
That's exactly it. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
You could shit in a pizza box,
You could shit in
which
a
is
pizza box.
apparently all the rage in
Yeah.
my city. Like
No,
it is quite the thing to shit in pizza boxes.
Damn. That
It's like in Vietnam, they would be like, "Don't touch anything," and it's like here, if you see a pizza box, it's like, "Don't touch it."
it might have
If
shit
you're
in it.
walking down the sidewalk, you see a closed pizza box. It's like, don't.
Christ. Meat lovers.
Oh God. So this feels like the after party already. So
Well, okay, I just like to, before we close
Uh-huh,
off, I just
uh-huh.
like to thank Misery for that will be in Misery Tourism. I'd like to thank you guys for putting it in there. And I look forward
I
to
mean,
getting,
it will be in Misery Loves Company.
well, yeah, and the magazine too.
It'll be in the misery toilet.
We should create a special section of the website. We cleaned up the bar at the top, so now we consolidated some things, so now there's more room. We should create a special section called the toilet.
Wait, we have
specifically.
that. We have
Yeah.
that toilet picture. We should just put John's submission in that picture.
Oh, you know what? Well, that would be, in some ways, that would be a position of real honor since
That's
the
fair.
shit on the sidebar doesn't scroll, right? Like the shit on the sidebar is there forever. You know what? John? Rudy, can you do that? Can you do that? Do you know how to do the work with that widget to add
I
text?
believe so.
Slide it below the toilet, and
Yeah.
we
Oh, it's
will
just a
we will
widget,
put your
yeah.
poem
Yeah, we'll
we'll
put you-
immortalize your poem forever
Yep.
on the Misery Tourism sidebar.
You in the
next to the
toilet now, nigga.
And when I say forever, until like I get sick of it being there and take it out.
Wow, it's truly an honor to be the first acceptance of Misery Tourism.
Ever. The first thing we ever published. Okay. All right, guys. You did a great job, everyone, of like buying time right there to give Josh a chance to show up. Especially since he signed up literally half an hour before Misery Tourism started. You think he'd be able to make it? I don't know. I mean, why do you send a message 6:04 p.m. I'll read tonight if possible. And then I say definitely, and then the definitely message was seen. Me sending the link is just listed as sent. So something happened anyway, Josh, if you're watching this, we're ashamed of you, I guess. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna call it. I don't think Josh is coming. I'm heartbroken, but I don't think he's coming. So I guess that's it. I guess that's it for the night. Thank you to everyone who read. This has been another great one. Thank you to Bizarre. Thank you to Rudy. Thank you to Kat. Thank you to Jan. Thank you to Rudy again for once again allowing Jan to warg into you, for surrendering your body for art. Thank you to Mark. No thank you to Josh. Thank you to Cletus for providing the poem, and thank you to Kat for reading Cletus's poem. And finally, thank you to John for doing what needed to be done to make amends for your crime. So anyway, this has been Misery Loves Company. We do this every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Anyone is welcome to come and join us. Anyone is welcome to come and share their work. We tweet out the link just before we begin from our Twitter account at Misery Tourism. And yeah, we're accepting submissions again. So if you're watching this and you're a fan of Misery Tourism, if you're one of the 15 people or whatever who watches this every week, maybe you should send us an email. Maybe you should send us our work and see if we like it. Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you to everyone who read. Thanks, everyone. I think I'm belaboring the point here, so to hell with it. We're done.